Right now, as you hear these words, something is happening in the Philippines that forced China's hand. On October 9th, 2025, Beijing tightened its grip on rare earth exports, adding 5 new elements to the banned list. Then, just 1 month later, on November 10th, they reversed course completely. They suspended all those controls for an entire year. China doesn't back down. So what happened? The Philippines discovered $1 trillion in rare earth reserves, and nobody was looking. President Marcos unveiled the national strategy at Davos in early 2025, and suddenly the world was paying attention. You've probably seen headlines claiming $4 trillion. That's speculation. The official number from the Philippine government? $1 trillion. Even that conservative estimate terrifies Beijing. It's a rival they didn't expect to face. Here's what makes it terrifying for Beijing. The Philippines have explored only 5% of their reserves. 5%. Imagine finding an oil field the size of Texas when the world thought we were running out. That's what Mindanao holds. The concentrated deposits there contain more untapped rare earths than anywhere else outside China. Beijing knows this. That's why October 9th wasn't routine. It was panic. China's announcement, No. 61 expanded their controlled rare earths from 7 to 12. They targeted holmium, erbium, thulium, europium, and ytterbium. These aren't obscure, they're everything. Holmium powers medical lasers. Erbium runs the fiber optic cables that carry your internet. Europium makes your smartphone screen work. Ytterbium drives industrial manufacturing. Thulium is in hospital imaging machines. But here's what people miss. China wasn't just cutting raw materials. They targeted processing technology and magnet components, the know-how, the finished products. That tells you something crucial. They're not afraid of losing mines. They're terrified of losing the entire supply chain. Then came November 10th, 2025. 32 days later, China backed down completely. They suspended the export controls for an entire year. The official story, facilitating international trade. The real story, their tough stance backfired. The controls forced exactly what they feared, forced diversification. To understand the threat, you need to know what Marcos created. PGMPI Philippines Global Minerals Incorporated. Launched in early 2025, it has one mission: develop strategic rare earth elements. This isn't a private company hunting profit. It's the government, all in. When Marcos announced it at Davos, he wasn't pitching investors. He was announcing geopolitical intent. The Philippines just entered the game with state power behind them. This is what Beijing saw. Not speculation, but state mobilization. And history shows what happens next. Monopolies crumble. Oil? OPEC dominated for decades until US shale broke the cartel. Uranium? The Cold War proved that control is temporary when rivals commit resources. Rare earths follow the same script. But if China controls 70% of global production, why panic over a country that hasn't mined a single pound? The answer reveals how fragile monopolies really are. Here's what Beijing won't admit. Their monopoly wasn't built on better geology. It was built on luck and timing. Think of it as a chess game. For 40 years, the US, Europe, and Australia chased oil and gold. China quietly built dominance in rare earths. Nobody noticed until the game was nearly lost. For decades, while others focused on oil and gold, China invested systematically in rare earths mining, processing, and refining. By the time the world realized these materials powered the tech revolution, the game was over. China had the mines, the refineries, the dominance. Here's the key. 70% of global production doesn't mean 70% of the world's reserves. It means 70% of refining capacity. That's the real difference. It's like this. China owns the refinery. The Philippines own the oil field. The question isn't who has more. It's how fast you can build a new refinery. Refinery capacity can be built. Not fast, not cheap, but it can be done. And when your competitor has $1 trillion in untapped reserves and 95% still unexplored, the clock is ticking. That's why November 10th matters. It wasn't a concession. It was an admission. China realized October 9th had backfired. Their restrictions didn't look strong, they looked desperate. Every export ban pushes dependent countries to find alternatives. The Philippines just signaled they could be that alternative. So the ban became self-defeating. You've seen the $4 trillion number everywhere. Here's the reality. The Philippine government says 1 trillion. The 4 trillion? Market speculation. When Marcos announced the strategy at Davos, investors started projecting values. Analysts multiplied potential reserves by commodity prices. Some hit 4 trillion. But those are guesses, not official estimates. The official estimate 1 trillion comes from exploring 5% of Mindanao. If that ratio continues, the number grows. But even the conservative estimate is enough to shake the global rare earths balance. Here's what most people don't get. Why would Beijing panic over rare earths? The answer is technical dependence. Electric vehicles. Every EV motor contains permanent magnets made from neodymium and praseodymium. Without rare earths, the motor doesn't work. There's no substitute. You can build the battery, the chassis, the most advanced factory in the world. But without those 2-centimeter magnets, you've got an expensive paperweight. It's like building a heart without valves. Technically interesting, functionally dead. China controls most of the world's neodymium. Cut the exports, and EV production grinds to a halt globally. Semiconductors. Chips need europium and ytterbium for doping and precision manufacturing. Without them, processors can't operate at nanometer scales. No processors means no smartphones, no data centers, no weapons systems. China controls the supply, restrict it, and chip manufacturing stops. Defense systems, missiles, radar, night vision. All depend on ytterbium, dysprosium, terbium. The US military flagged rare earths as a critical vulnerability. If China cuts exports during a conflict, American weapons stop working. This isn't theory, it's technical reality. And that's why China's 70% of global production translates to geopolitical leverage. Control the materials, control what gets built. Here's what the suspension reveals. China's grip backfired. The tighter they squeezed, the faster alternatives emerged. The Philippines signaled capacity. Australia ramped up. The US accelerated domestic processing. The restrictions had become self-sabotage. That's why they backed off buying time until November 2026. China will be watching the Philippines closely. If Mindanao ramps up production, Beijing has 2 choices. Reimpose controls and accelerate their own decline, or accept the monopoly is finished. This is the dynamic most miss. It's not about one announcement. It's about rare earths being redistributed. The next 12 months determine whether China holds dominance or the Philippines trigger a total realignment. What's happening in the Philippines isn't isolated. It's part of a much larger strategy the US and its allies have been building for years. Critical minerals wasn't a mainstream term until recently. Now it's central to national security. The US and Europe, Japan, South Korea all identified rare earths as a supply chain liability, not just for economics, for survival. When one nation controls the materials powering defense technology, that nation rules. That's why the US strategy builds partnerships, not just domestic mining redundant supply chains across multiple countries. The Philippines are perfect. US ally. Massive reserves. Government committed to extraction. If they scale up, the US gains an alternative source independent of Chinese control. China sees it. October 9th wasn't just about the Philippines. It was a shot across the bow of the entire US critical minerals strategy. Beijing was saying, we won't give up dominance without a fight. November 10th proved something else. We also won't fight in ways that accelerate our defeat. Which brings us to China's most revealing move. Controlling processing technology. October 9th's controls targeted processing technology and magnet components. Why? Because raw, rare earths are useless without refinement. Mine all the neodymium you want, but without processing into high-quality magnets, you've got worthless dirt. China dominates both mining and processing. Processing is where the real chokehold sits. Building a mine takes years. Building a rare earth processing facility takes a decade, maybe more. It requires specialized know-how, strict environmental controls, and massive capital investment. Here's what this means in practice. Imagine the Philippines discover oil tomorrow. Great news, right? Except they have no refinery. So they ship it to China. China still controls the final product, sets the price, holds the leverage. Rare earths? Same exact game. That's why, even if the Philippines start mining tomorrow, they'll still need processing capacity. And if China controls processing technology, They keep leverage even if they lose dominance in mining. But here's the problem Beijing can't solve. Controlling processing technology only works if nobody else builds it. Right now, the US is pouring billions into domestic processing. Australia is building facilities. Europe is funding projects. Japan is developing alternatives. China's trying to protect the secret recipe when 3 competitors already hired the chemists. That protection only holds if you prevent knowledge transfer. But when governments invest billions in independent capacity, the secret expires. This is where history matters. Resource panics follow the same pattern. Oil in the 1970s, uranium during the Cold War, rare earths now. There are 4 stages. Stage 1. One country owns the resource. Everyone else depends. Stage 2. That country weaponizes it. Prices spike, exports get cut. Stage 3. Dependent countries panic. Investments in alternatives explode. Stage 4. The monopoly shatters. Power redistributes. OPEC dominated oil for decades. Then US shale broke the cartel. China is in Stage 2, trying desperately to avoid Stage 3. The Philippines just pushed them toward it. November 10th proves China sees the pattern. Here's where it gets interesting. China's not defending production control. It's defending the refinery after the oil field already moved. That's a losing game. If the Philippines develop mining and the US builds processing, China's monopoly becomes irrelevant. Their control of processing technology is a defensive move that admits defeat. Here's the final reality. What's underground determines what's built above. Rare earths aren't just commodities. They decide where technology gets built. Look at history. If you had coal, you built railways. If not, you bought them. If you had steel, you built skyscrapers. If not, you imported them. Whoever controlled the raw materials controlled the future. Rare earths work the same way. Have neodymium, build EVs. Don't have it, import parts. Have europium, make chips. Don't, depend on others. That's why the Philippines matter. It's not about money. It's about redistributing where technology gets manufactured. Picture Mindanao as a rare earth production hub. The Philippines stop being just a supplier. They become an industrial center. Tesla builds a gigafactory in Manila. Samsung opens a chip plant in Davao. Lockheed Martin sets up defense manufacturing in Cebu. When you control materials, you attract manufacturing. Manufacturing creates jobs. Jobs create power. The real value isn't just the materials, it's the industrial ecosystem they enable. China isn't just fighting for market share. They're fighting to keep control over where the next generation of technology gets built. Here's the twist. Monopolies crumble faster than they're built. China spent decades building dominance, but once alternatives emerge, collapse accelerates. Dependence creates desperation. Every disrupted country invests in alternatives. Every supply chain anxious company diversifies sources. The harder China squeezes, the faster the world escapes. The Philippines are the test case for how new players break established monopolies. 95% of Mindanao untapped. If half those reserves go productive, the Philippines rival China in a decade. That timetable terrifies Beijing. October 9th was an attempt to slow it down. November 10th admitted they can't. Understand this. It goes far beyond rare earths. What's unfolding is a reconfiguration of where global industrial power sits. Decades ago, industrial power came from oil. The Middle East had it. The West depended on it. That dependence shaped wars, alliances, everything for 50 years. Then, 2008 hit. US shale exploded. Suddenly, America didn't need Saudi Arabia. Didn't need to protect Persian Gulf shipping lanes. Didn't need to prop up authoritarian regimes for oil. US energy independence shifted power. Shale changed the oil map. America went from vulnerable importer to competitive exporter. That shift redrew alliances, reduced Middle Eastern leverage, and reset global energy dynamics. Rare earths are in that same transition now. China has dominance. The West depends on it. But the Philippines, Australia, and US domestic investment are redistributing the map. In a decade, rare earths might not be a Chinese monopoly anymore. They could be a diversified supply where multiple countries produce. And when that happens, China's leverage evaporates. But the next 12 months are critical. China's suspension expires November 10th, 2026. That's the deadline. 12 months. 365 days. China will be watching every Philippine move, every mining license, every foreign investment in Mindanao, every processing deal. Because this window decides if the monopoly survives. If the Philippines launch large-scale production before then, China faces a choice. Reimpose controls and accelerate diversification, or accept the monopoly is finished. If they don't scale up, China keeps leverage longer. This is the dynamic that makes 2026 decisive. Not because of one discovery, but because the moves happening now reveal whether China's dominance holds or we're watching a monopoly collapse. Here's the final insight. China's fighting for the wrong thing. Control the refinery but lose the oil field. You lose anyway. The Philippines are the oil field. Mindanao is the raw supply. If the Philippines develop extraction and the US develops processing, China's hold on technology becomes useless. They'll own a refinery nobody needs. That's why November 10th matters more than October 9. October 9 was defensive. November 10 was an admission. China realized controlling processing won't save them if they lose mining dominance. They need to stop the Philippines. But export controls only accelerate the diversification they fear. So where does this leave us? The next 12 months are critical. China's suspension ends November 10, 2026. Either the Philippines scale production and permanently redistribute rare earths power, or China regains control. But understand this, it's not about mining. It's about where industrial power moves over the next 20 years. Every EV on the road, every smartphone in your hand, every defense system protecting borders, they all depend on rare earths. Whoever controls rare earths controls where technology gets built. The Philippines have 95% of Mindanao unexplored. China knows if half those reserves go productive, their monopoly crumbles. Not in decades, in years. October 9th was panic. November 10th was surrender. What's buried in the Philippines will determine the technological map of this century. This redistribution isn't coming. It's already happening.